Hello, I'm David Tunick, president of the IFPDA, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you today to Rebecca Gilbert and Hans Holbein, A Dance of Death in Two Parts. It's the third of 12 Zoom events in this year's IFPDA Print Month. In addition to the annual print fair in New York each year, we've organized events since our inception. That is the founding of the IFPDA in 1987. And that includes Print Month, which brings scholarly Zooms to an audience across a broad range of time zones. I welcome you all. Today's presentation is brought to you in collaboration with our friends at the Print Center in Philadelphia, itself founded by print collectors and artists more than 100 years ago as the Print Club of Philadelphia. Today's subject focuses on the influence of one particular old master printmaker, Hans Holbein, on a contemporary printmaker, our guest, the aforementioned Elizabeth Gilbert. As an art dealer myself, who started with a deep passion and involvement in old master prints, not least German artists like Albrecht Dürer and Hans Holbein, today's topic is of tremendous fascination to me. And I'm going to divert for a moment to tell you another example of a living artist relationship with an old master, and that's Helen Frankenthaler, who was my across the street neighbor in Connecticut for many years. We became very close friends. It didn't take long for Helen to talk about her lifelong admiration of her favorite old master, and that was Titian. She was, for example, obsessed with Titian's monumental woodcut, The Submersion of Pharaoh's Army in the Red Sea. Her knowledge was so deep that she was invited to lecture on Titian and the woodcut at the Detroit Institute of Art in the mid-70s, and I'm fortunate to have a copy of her notes that she prepared for her lecture. The influence of Titian on Frankenthaler's own work, especially Titian's depiction of water in the huge woodcut, was apparent in many of Helen's own woodcuts. So it is that I will be fascinated today, as I said, to hear about the similar profound impact of Hans Holbein on the woodcuts of Rebecca Gilbert. But first, it's my distinct privilege next to introduce you to Elizabeth F. Spungen, the eminent executive director of the Print Center in Philadelphia, a position Liz has held since 2006. Liz, who received her undergraduate and graduate degrees at Penn, has an estimable background as a curator, lecturer, frequent panelist, and author of too many articles and publications to recount here today. Before Liz takes the floor, a few logistics. There will be a Q&A at the end of the program. I'll be back to moderate that. There's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and you can click on that to type your questions in. We'll get to as many of the questions as we can, but we've got a couple of hundred registrants for today's program, a really nice turnout, and we apologize in advance if we don't get to every single one. So Liz, we're extremely pleased to have you as our leader today, and I now turn the program over to you.
Thank you so much, David. It is a pleasure to be here today to introduce the Print Center and Rebecca Gilbert and her exceptional project, A Dance of Death in Two Parts. Thank you so much to Jenny Gibbs and the staff and board of the IFPDA for the invitation and for the foundation's support of our upcoming exhibition of Gilbert's series. For those of you not familiar with the Print Center, we were founded in Philadelphia in 1915, and we are the oldest nonprofit organization dedicated to print, which we define as printmaking and photography in the country. We operate from an idiosyncratic and wonderful 19th century carriage house that we moved into in 1917. And I am sitting in one of our 3 exhibition spaces where we are currently showing a survey of spectacular works from ULAE, including the Jane Hammond you partially see behind me. Founded together by artists and collectors, that spirit of collaboration guides us today, as does an early and long-standing dedication to inclusion and education. The Print Center offers 3 cycles of temporary exhibitions each year, which can be in 1, 2, or all 3 of our galleries. One of those cycles is dedicated to solo shows awarded from our annual international competition, which this year is in its 99th iteration. Exhibitions are complemented by an active roster of public programs. We also have a publication program, an on-site and online gallery store that represents about 100 local, national, and international printmakers and photographers, and an arts education program that serves 600 students annually through 20 semester-long artist residencies in Philadelphia public high schools. I have had the privilege to know Rebecca Gilbert since 2006 when I took up my role here at the Print Center. And since then, we have worked together in many capacities, including as an exhibiting artist, a gallery store artist, and a public program presenter. In recognition of our relationship, you can see on the right, the board and staff of the Print Center commissioned a piece from Rebecca, a portrait of me, which was quite an honor. And on the left, just another piece by Rebecca as a touchstone for looking at the work we're going to present today. I am very pleased to support this current project and look forward with great anticipation to exhibiting it in the fall of 2025. I'm very happy to tell you a bit more about Rebecca's career before I introduce her directly. Rebecca Gilbert is a Philadelphia-based artist dedicated to creating distinctly modern prints using traditional processes and techniques. She received a BFA in printmaking from Marshall University in Huntington, West Virginia, and an MFA in printmaking and book arts from the University of the Arts in Philadelphia. She has taught printmaking and book arts at distinguished institutions, including Wells College Book Arts Center, Maryland Institute College of Art, and the University of the Arts, and has often been a visiting artist at academic institutions and nonprofit organizations. Rebecca's exhibition record is extensive and includes regional, national, and international shows in galleries and museums in places as wide-ranging as California, New York, Canada, Estonia, Korea, Spain, and the UK. And that's in addition to a solo show she had here at the Print Center in 2017. Her work is held in numerous public collections and in the US can be found at the Bernard A. Zuckerman Museum of Art in Georgia, the Free Library of Philadelphia's Print and Picture Collection, and Princeton University Library's Graphic Arts Collection. She has a lot of fans in the UK, and her work is collected by the Victoria and Albert Museum and the St. Bride Foundation in London, the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford, and the Gregynog Hall Library in Wales. Among Rebecca's most recent awards are an Independence Foundation Fellowship to support A Dance of Death in Two Parts, a Victor Hammer Fellowship from Wells College, a Tarangini Fellowship in Bangalore, India, an Illuminate the Arts Grant from the City of Philadelphia, and a Maker Creator Research Fellowship from Winterthur Museum and Library. A Dance of Death in Two Parts has already received significant press attention, despite the fact that it's about only 2/3 complete, and has been covered by Printmaking Today and has an entire volume of the Wood Engravers Network, block and burin dedicated to it. Community is especially important to Rebecca, and in addition to being a vital member of the Print Center's community, she is on the board of the Wood Engravers Network and is active in SGC, along with several other organizations. I am now very pleased to introduce you to Rebecca Gilbert.
Hello. Thank you. First, I would like to thank David and Michelle and everyone from IFPDA for inviting me to talk about my project today. And I'd like to thank Liz and the Print Center for their ongoing support. Truly, I am grateful for our ongoing relationship. I'd also like to thank everyone in attendance for taking the time to join us today. It's fair to say that my project, A Dance of Death in Two Parts, is not only the most ambitious and important project of my artistic career to date, but it's also just generally the most important thing in my life. It's a deeply personal endeavor, memorializing and honoring my husband, Naren, who died nearly 5 years ago, just about a month and a half after I started the project. That means I've been working on the project for almost exactly 5 years now. And during that 5 years, I have worked on it nearly every single day since I began. So I'm just going to dive right in here. A Dance of Death in Two Parts is a series of 82 editioned wood engravings with letterpress text, which contrasts my recreation of Hans Holbein the Younger's original series of 41 prints, published in 1538, with 41 of my own. And what you're looking at here on the left is my recreation of Hans Holbein's The Count. And on the right, my own image representing our unhoused neighbors. A modern interpretation of Memento Mori, the theme documents our time and culture by illustrating an array of people, trades, fashion, architecture, technology, and economic status. It combines Holbein's depiction of those from different strata of 15th century Northern European society with my own images of the modern world to reflect our times and cultures. As I already mentioned, I'm working in wood engraving. That's when you engrave an image into end grain hardwood, such as hard rock maple or boxwood, using fine and very pointy tools called burins. The original Holbein images were wood cuts, meaning they were carved into plank grain wood and carved using traditional woodcut tools, such as these. Though from the tiny scale that they worked in, I'm guessing most of the carving was done with a knife, as pictured on the right. It's important to note that while Hans Holbein the Younger made all of the drawings for the 1538 Dance of Death series, the project was in fact a collaborative endeavor between him and a masterful block cutter referred to as a Formschneider named Hans Lützelberger, who methodically and with breathtaking skill carved every block. This division of labor was not only common, but was the norm during this time, and the production of anything from a fine art print to a book was a collaborative undertaking utilizing several people. The artist made the drawing, in this case, Holbein. The Formschneider cut the blocks, in this case, Lützelberger. And when making a book, someone else did the printing and someone else did the binding. In the case of my project, I'm performing all of the roles myself. So what is the Dance of Death? It's an allegorical theme that acknowledges the universality of death, and it has been revisited by numerous artists throughout history, the earliest recorded depiction being a mural painted around 1424. Of all of the documented depictions of the genre, however, I believe none are better known than Hans Holbein the Younger's 1538 series of 41 miniature woodcuts carved by Hans Lützelberger. The theme has been depicted as single images and within series, but the common representations among different artists and images is that death, represented as a skeleton, appears sometimes dancing, sometimes playing an instrument, sometimes gently, sometimes violently, to take someone away. Other common symbols, such as skulls or an hourglass, are often placed or sometimes hidden in the compositions to remind the viewer of our own temporality. It's part one, my remaking of Holbein's images. I have to change the text here. I recently reached a major milestone where I have completed now the drawing, carving, printing, typesetting, and printing of that of all 41 of Holbein's Dance of Death images. I've been talking about it in the future tense for so long that it's tough to change the tenses when I talk about it. So it's not that I will act as Formschneider, it's that I have acted as Formschneider, typesetter, and printer to remake all 41 miniature woodcuts from Hans Holbein the Younger's 1538 series, The Dance of Death. And I have faithfully carved them into end grain wood with the same attention to detail and at the same impressively miniature scale as the originals. I have additioned the blocks and additioned the type. And on the left here, you see the peddler as drawn by Holbein and carved by Lützelberger and printed later in 1538. And on the right, my recreation of that image. The only liberty that I've taken in the recreation of the Holbein images is with choosing different papers for different prints. All papers are archival and of high quality, but some are thicker, thinner, bright white, or warm toned, as you'll see. And from here on out, all the images that you look at, unless otherwise noted, were engraved and printed by me. Holbein and Lützelberger seem to work from a formula. First, they would choose a person to represent for each block. Second, include death in the form of a skeleton. Third, include an hourglass and other memento mori. Fourth, take a more is more approach to creating a composition, including representations of their time and culture and clues to life back then. And lastly, and perhaps most notably, they worked in a consistent scale, a mind-bogglingly miniature scale. This block and all of the blocks from their series measures only 6.5 by 5 centimeters, or roughly about 2.5 by 2 inches. So here on the left is pictured Holbein's image of the old man with a matchstick for scale to really put that into perspective. And on the right, of course, a reverse image, the impression from that. My motivation when embarking on this project was never merely to make reproductions of their images for the sake of doing it and having it, but more to commune with Holbein and Lützelberger through art, labor, and shared experience. At this tiny scale, it's imperative that I work under magnification to engrave every nook and cranny of these complex and detailed images to achieve the refinement and detail. Hence, there isn't a millimeter of any of these images that I haven't closely explored and re-experienced. It is a slow process. Emphasis on slow. Most of you are likely familiar with Holbein and Lützelberger's series, so I'll just show a few of the images that I've made. With 41 images, Holbein and Lützelberger's series is one of the most robust, representing a wide range of people, including many religious figures, such as the Cardinal and the Pope. Also prominently depicted, and with some social commentary, is figures from the aristocracy, such as the Emperor and the Queen. And often these images highlight corruption, like in The Advocate, where money is often exchanging hands. Here, while the poor and underprivileged look on. So I just want to take a minute to talk about what inspired me to do this project. And it wasn't just one thing. So first, I've long been drawn to universal themes revisited by artists through history, and themes of death, the spirit realm, the otherworldly, and the supernatural. Representations of longing, mystery, and communication between the realms of the living and the dead have long embedded in throughout most of my work. Portals leading to the mysterious unknown, along with my own symbols to represent memento mori, are also prominent in much of my work. Another reason is just because I love Holbein and Lützelberger's Stance of Death so much, I always include it in my presentations when discussing the history of relief printing to my students. Since we know Lützelberger was the Formschneider, it creates a perfect example for talking about division of creative labor during that time period. So every semester when I would give my presentation, when I would get to Holbein's Dance of Death slide, I would always stop and think, I wish I was Hans Lützelberger. I wish I could have been the one to engrave all of Holbein's drawings. And so finally one day, while talking with my husband, Naren, I realized that no one is stopping me. I can engrave all of Holbein's images if I want. So in the next moment, I realized that the only way it would really make sense to do that as a project is if I also matched it with 41 of my own images, a modern take on the theme. So within a matter of minutes, the idea appeared and solidified, and I began work later that same day. So part 2, my Dance of Death. Working from my own drawings, I will create a second series of 41 Dance of Death themed wood engravings that illustrate a contemporary representation of folks being taken away by death. Like Holbein's series, I'll pair each of my images with a verse, parable, quote, or phrase that will be printed from handset type, and I'll edition each image with accompanying text. So while I am following Holbein's more is more approach to composing an image by documenting my surroundings, experience, travels, technologies, stuffs, and culture, it's my project, so I don't need to have as constrained of rules in general. I can vary the size, shape, and orientation of my blocks and my paper. I can choose my own texts to accompanying the images. And as seen here, the Big Bang, this is not the first image that I made when I started this project, but it is intended to be the first in my final sequence of images. And it contrasts the first image in Holbein's series, which was the creation. No matter one's stage in life, age, race, economic status, popularity, death is the great equalizer. Several centuries have passed since Holbein's monumental series. I'm setting out to illustrate that while clothing and styles have evolved, politics have become more complicated, travel changed industry, diet, trade, and lifestyle, scientific developments have prolonged life, and the list goes on, there's still no cheating death. One thing holds true from the dawn of man through Holbein's time to now and beyond, and that's our mortality. I hope to make apparent that poetic beauty of that enormous truth while documenting the culture, technology, and roles of our time. So my creative process, because I don't have the same rules for making my series, I can work in any shape and draw my inspiration from many different places. I'm also responsible, of course, for rendering my own images. So I work by directly drawing from life, by taking photographs and working from photographs, sometimes collaging images together and then drawing on top. Oftentimes research is involved to construct my images. But at any rate, once my sketch is ready to transfer to the block, and I'm just going to walk you through my rendering of this Shudra image. I use a red wax space transfer paper to transfer my sketch to an end grain block. So here you can see that I've transferred my sketch, and it ends up just looking kind of like an out of focus, mushy red, vague roadmap to where things go. So the next step is that I go in with a 0.003 micron, a very fine tipped pen, to then draw in the image with a little more precision and a little more detail. And once I've completed inking in my drawing, I then stain the block with red oil-based ink. And the point of that is so once I begin engraving, I can still see my drawing, but I can also see what has been engraved away and what hasn't. Engraving The process of engraving is when I really begin to add texture and detail and a value structure to my image. Here it's engraved a little bit more detail and value structure. And once I get to a point where I'm pretty sure I'm nearly finished engraving the image, I'll roll black ink across it and pull a test proof. I can then make notes on the test proof and determine what edits I need to go back and make to refine my image even more. And once it's refined and ready to print, I lock it into a press and print an edition of the images. Here's just an image of the type of press that I've been using to edition both the blocks and the type. It's a cylinder press, Vandercook, and this is one of the presses at Wells College where I was working last year. On the right, you can see that Niren has a prominent place on the press anytime I'm printing and working on this project. Here, still not finished. This is the editioned image, but I still need to set the type using movable type and spacers, which then get locked into the press and printed. So there's the printed text for that piece. And then I have a completed print. And here are just a few details from that print. This is where the project becomes deeply personal and my perspectives, motivations, and meaning behind the project shifts. I actually made this image very early on in the project. It was one of the first of my own original drawings that I made. So this is my husband, Niren, represented as the gamer. You see, he was still here when I came up with the idea for this project. He was not only supportive, but gushing with enthusiasm. He was proud of me. He helped me brainstorm a list of roles that I should consider representing. When I suggested I include him in the series as the gamer, he was thrilled. He posed for this image about 2 weeks before he died. Neither of us knew it at the time that he would die in 2 weeks. And if we knew, of course, I wouldn't have been drawing death coming after him. I didn't start engraving the image until a few weeks after he died. It felt a bit morbid to make this image, and I definitely hesitated. But then I just thought about how excited he was to be included and how enthusiastic he was about the project. And I knew that I should still make it. So I did. I was now spending all of my evenings, mornings, and nights and days alone, devastated, utterly heartbroken, and deep in the throes of utter sadness and grief. But I felt close to him while I focused through magnification on his beautiful fingers, toes, face, all of them. And I thought about how tender and gentle death was to the old man in Holbein's print. So I made sure to render death as a comforting presence there to catch him. The text reflects the adventure of his gaming theme, a few lyrics from Led Zeppelin's Battle of Evermore, a song that we sometimes sing together while drinking beers on our stoop. I have an appreciation for artworks depicted in the background of artworks. My large-scale woodcut of a portal in the form of an upturned well is in the background behind him. I had worried that by having Niren pose for that image, that I had somehow summoned death, and living with that feeling felt like a chemical burn in my spirit. So I thought if I summoned death and it came for him, I will do my image next, just in case. So I made the printmaker. This is me in my South Philadelphia studio with death coming out from under the blankets to get me. My woodcuts in the background provided the required memento mori with the hourglass and the skulls. The text, a poem written by Niren a few years prior, that happened to be loosely about me working in the studio was the perfect pairing. Things are feeling really grim. About a month later, the onset of the pandemic followed. Everyone locked in their houses, wearing masks outdoors, all of the crazy stuff in the news, teaching online. It was wild and dark. It's worth noting that Holbein and Lützelberger's series was made during the time of the plague. My rational mind knows that I don't wield that kind of power, but in the depths of my grief, it felt like COVID too might have been my fault. I made a mini series within my series featuring a few essential workers. Here we have the mail carrier wearing the mask, of course. And for the background, I drew from a local cemetery on Pine Street, for those of you in Philly. And for the skeletons in the background, I borrowed from Michael Wohlgemuth's Dance of Death, published in 1493 in the Nuremberg Chronicle. Another image from my neighborhood, and actually my block in South Philly, the sanitation worker, another essential worker. And worth noting in this image, in place of an hourglass, Death, who's driving the truck, takes a moment to look at his watch. The truck totes a custom license plate, Mort, for Death. And if that planet Earth with the welcome wagon at the bottom throws you off at all, I was really thinking not only about the death of the sanitation worker, but the death of our planet. I think a lot of people view that dark hole in the back of the trash truck like a never-ending vortex that sucks our trash away. But of course, we know that it doesn't. One more essential worker, the grocery clerk. I think that is definitely one bizarre experience that we can all relate to. What an ordeal it was just to go to the grocery store. And again, we have our masks. You can see some of the technology, the ATM reader in the background. And in the cart in the top, you see COVID-19 itself, and in the bottom, the hourglass and some essential provisions for being locked down in COVID, a 6-pack of beer. Beyond showing stuffs and technology, one fact about our culture now is that overseas travel is relatively easy. So the Shudra image that I showed before was made after a trip to India that I made with Naren's parents in 2023. And this image I made after returning from a research trip with members and friends from the Wood Engravers Network in 2022. The London Cabie is an iconic figure, and I was pleased to document him along with this fancy car. The kidney shape of the image is due to the fact that instead of working from a block that was fabricated into a square or a rectangle, I worked from what's called a round, which is basically just a slice off of a tree that's planed down to type high and sanded to a polished finish. I drew the composition to work with the shape, which was a fun challenge. I modeled the woman standing talking to the cabbie after my own body, and reflecting back to how I've thought about myself as death in the past, and how pretty much every depiction through history of death that I've seen takes on a masculine air. So I was thinking about death as a female figure, as myself, and so I modeled death after myself. With all the modern images and documents of what I see in the world, there are personal connections infused throughout my series. I've been thinking a lot in terms of the whole labeling aspect of both mine and Holbein's project. It makes sense that that needs to exist somehow to make the project work, but been thinking a lot about how no one is ever just one thing. In America, people are very much associated or identified with their trade or their profession. Even when you strip that away, still no one is just one thing. And in fact, we're different things to different people and at different times, including ourselves. This is one example. At the time when I was kind of pondering this labeling identity thing, I had a few friends that had recently lost their mothers. I was thinking about how to develop this image, and something very strange happened. I was walking through my upstairs of my house, and a black and white photograph that I took of my mom lying on top of her mother's grave, a photograph I took about 20 years ago and hadn't seen since then. It had fallen out of my closet and was lying on the floor, face up, just kind of looking at me. And I thought, this is what I need to draw for this image. But as I already established, I'm nervous about representing people. I don't want to make them die. So I called my mom and told her what I was thinking about and asked how she felt about me drawing, a version of that image and including it. And she was all for it. So I continued. So I drew from yet another cemetery on Pine Street in my neighborhood to create the wall in the background and the tombstones. I added my own memento mori image to the tombstones, and I made the clouds in the background form a portal for the spirits to travel through. While I was working on this image, Niren's best friend Jim lost his mother. He's a writer, and I asked him if he would like to take a stab at writing something for the print. I thought it might be cathartic, and I also was really happy to include him in the project. What he wrote, you see here. It is tranquil, beautiful, and couldn't make a more perfect pairing for this image. So my series is mostly less focused on aristocracy and religion and more on the underdog. And in favor of the underdog, I'm rooting for them, and I try my best to represent them with respect and dignity. This is another print that's thinking about labeling roles and includes another of Niren's poems. The Widow is another self-portrait, and I posed for it in my own studio. I had planned the skull in the doorway, but I wasn't planning on depicting myself with a halo. It just so happened that I had another piece of artwork in the background, that the angle that I photographed myself, the artwork just happened to make a halo behind my head. So when I drew it, I decided to include it. The two bells on the wall is a communication device for the spirit realm, and the doorway is a portal. The skeleton putting the bone necklace around my neck was another tender moment borrowed from Holbein. Well, I'm choosing a lot of different characters from Holbein. Some overlap. Holbein depicted the child. Every time I think about a child in relation to death, unfortunately, the first thing that comes to mind is school shootings, because they're such a commonplace event in our culture. This is a work in progress. I haven't printed it yet, and it is not a pleasurable print to make. It's not therapeutic or cathartic. It's upsetting, disturbing, depressing, anxiety-inducing. And I actually had to take a break from working on it and work on something else for a while. But since I am documenting our culture and our times, I didn't feel it would be right to leave it out. Our culture is far from perfect. I will say that I couldn't bring myself to include death in the image. And honestly, I thought that having police officers standing by with machine guns was disturbing enough. So this completed print will feature a companion block, a small shrine that will be printed at the bottom of the paper under the text and the children. I have just a few more works in progress that I'll zip through quickly so that hopefully we can get lots of questions. The butcher is another image from my neighborhood, and another image where death features prominently. Death is in the pig head, the hanging baby cattle, steaks, sausages. The whole space is filled to the brim with death. And while the butcher stands amongst it all, again, I didn't include a skeleton in this image per se, but I made another accompanying block to be printed under the text, where death with a capital D is tolling the bell, his skull and long bony finger reflected in the metal. This is a work in progress, the street barber. The skeleton that I drew to appear as though it's a bus advertisement, reaching out into the third dimension to grab the barber, was very much inspired by the theatrical scale of the skeleton in this Utagawa Kuniyoshi print. A second death is represented in this print too, and that's the death of the University of the Arts, where I went to grad school and then taught for 20 years. It closed quite suddenly this summer. It is represented with its logo flying on a flag high over Broad Street. Drawn during my time last year in upstate New York, the Carney represents a niche and unique traveling lifestyle, as well as more rural entertainment and literally featuring death with death's arrow. In closing, and this is my last slide, the major motivating factor for me to complete this project, and the most important and meaningful thing to me in the world right now, is to complete the project. That's 82 images with letterpress printed text, plus a title page, a colophon, and a dedication page to Naren. And to get it into as many special collections, libraries, and museums as possible, so they will be safe, accessible, and preserved. And so that Naren's and my legacy and the legacy of our love will be safe, accessible, and preserved. This little block will be printed at the foot of Naren's dedication page, and the completed sets of prints will be collated and housed unbound into custom-built clamshell boxes that I will also make. So that wraps up the formal part of my talk. I just want to thank IFPDA again for your support, and the Print Center. I'll just keep thanking you, hopefully for a long time to come, for all of your support. And I also would like to thank the Independence Foundation for, in part, supporting my project. The estimated completion time is somewhere around fall 2025. While I've exhibited some prints from the series in different venues and in different forms, the first complete exhibition of the complete project will debut at the Print Center in Philadelphia, and I hope that you will all sign up for the Print Center's mailing list, sign up for my mailing list, and follow along so that when that happens, you can be there to celebrate with us.
Thank you, Rebecca. That was extremely powerful and sensitive, impressive, and I'm sure the entire audience appreciated it as much as I did. Some questions have come in. So one of them I can't resist as an art dealer myself is, where can your prints be bought and how much do they cost? If that isn't too crass to begin with, I don't think it is.
Excellent. Price always makes me feel uncomfortable, but that is part of what we're here for, isn't it? So sure, you can purchase prints directly through me or through the Print Center. I'm actually really happy to say that there have been a few advance orders for complete sets of prints. One advance order has been accepted by the Philadelphia Museum of Art. So definitely actually number 2 in the edition. They'll get, the Philadelphia Museum of Art will get the complete box set, and that's where that'll live. So I'll break it down. There's a total of 82 images, 41 plus 41. And so I'm making editions of 82. of each of the 82 images. 1 through 41, I'm setting aside to collate into complete box sets. And 42 through 82 are available individually. So that way it is accessible to more people like myself that maybe just, want and can afford 1 or 2. The price currently for individual images is $125, which is quite a steal. I don't know how long it will stay at that price. And the price for the complete box set of 82 images, which also has a title page, colophon, dedication page, table of contents, and a beautiful cloth-covered clamshell box with a custom image engraved and printed by me and an inset into the front, is $10,000, which is also, I think, a steal, and I'm not sure how long that price will stay.
Okay,
either.
thank you. Thank you for that. Another question. Do you yourself own a copy of Holbein's Dance of Death?
An original copy?
Original, yes.
Oh, no, but I'm glad you asked. So I do have about a shelf and a half on my bookshelf that has books about Dance of Death themes by different artists, by different people, and other types of reproductions of Holbein that have, whether it's people reproducing his images or other people trying to carve them and reproduce them. But anyway, when I made my first 2 Holbein images, I was working from reproductions, and I was thrilled. I thought they looked pretty great, but I knew that I needed to go and look at the real deal. And so I made an appointment at the print study room at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And I realized immediately that what I thought I was doing that looked good, like it wasn't even like 50% good enough. I mean, it's difficult to reproduce a print. When you see the image printed from the original block, it's about 50 levels higher, the elegance and cleanliness of every line. So I spent a good amount of time looking at the originals, taking notes to write about the originals, photographing them. They have almost the complete set. There were a few they didn't have. The Library of Congress sent me high resolution scans of some that were missing. So I'm really grateful for their help and support too. So I tried to work, and of course I went back. I need to go back and investigate some more. So I did go and see those prints at the Morgan about 2 years ago. I think that was too.
Okay, great. Thank you. Somebody has asked about getting access to the recording, and I can answer that. The IFPDA will be posting this in due course. It can take a week or 2, but it will be on the IFPDA website, which you can Google. And I think you did talk about your introduction to Holbein, but what's your very first memory of being introduced to Holbein?
Well, I don't remember my first memory. It just seems like I was always familiar with his images, but from reproductions. So really, I think I was first impacted by the content and the way that they were depicted. And so I had known about those images for many years before I finally saw one in real life.
Was that from a class in school, or?
Yeah, I actually I took a history as an adult and a professional printmaker. I actually took my favorite class of my lifetime, which was a history of printmaking with Tony Rosati. So I was taking the class with all of my undergraduate students, and I loved it. And the way the class was structured, we would meet half the time in the classroom and look at slides and read things and talk about it. And the other 50% of the class, we went to the Philadelphia Museum of Art's print study room and looked at the real McCoy. And so, I tried to put this into words during my talk, but when you look at an image and the caption states it's a particular size, it's not the size you're looking at, and it's just hard to wrap your brain around. But when I actually saw a real print in real life, and it really, it's like a little bigger than this, it just really clicked how tremendously amazing these really were.
You and I had a similar experience. My own introduction was in a college classroom passing around original prints by Dürer and Rembrandt. I couldn't believe I could touch something that Dürer had touched, and just it kind of blows you away. That was the experience you had. A question came in from Jun Nakamura. He says, lovely talk, thanks so much. You mentioned adding texture in the cutting process, working from a line drawing on the block rather than planning or hatching shading beforehand. This seems different from the Holbein copy process. Do you do this for the spontaneity of it, or is there another reason?
Yeah, that is a really great question. And yes and yes. So my role to create Holbein's images exist the way they are because Holbein was making drawings, probably with a pen. Lützelberger's job was to faithfully make that print look like Holbein's drawing. So that act of carving the block is not something to be inspired or creative. It is a labor, a highly skilled labor, which I admire and appreciate very much. And so, the image with all of its rendering and form and shading was established before the carving process took place. So the way I'm creating the images, I'm not establishing all of that in the beginning. I think of printmaking and carving as a very important part of the process of drawing and rendering. So my drawing isn't complete until I've carved the whole thing. And one thing, I teach wood engraving a lot too. And when I first started wood engraving and when I talked to my students about it, I would look at an amazing wood engraving and like some of the like wild and crazy textures and patterns that would appear in the lights and shadows and think like, how did that artist ever think like, oh, that's how I need to do this. And now that I'm more experienced, I realize like that is not how it works. It's like you kind of go over the block with a tool and make some marks. And then you think, oh, that doesn't quite look right yet. Let me take another tool and add a different type of mark on top of it. Yeah, so it's a lot more organic like that.
Creating as you go, organic and linear.
Yeah, definitely.
Ritesh Panda sends this in. He says, a wonderful presentation. I wanted to ask, what was the nature of research that brings you to India, that brought you to India in 2023, how it influenced your work? And then maybe we'll have time for one more before closing this down.
Okay, cool. Well, Niran was Indian. And so obviously his parents are Indian. And so because Niran was sick for a number of years, we were never able to travel to India together. But I did eventually get to go with his mom and stepdad, and I got to visit his dad while I was there too. And it was amazing. So most of my experience there was spending time with family and traveling with family. But I did get to work at Therangini Studio, which was mentioned in the intro, which is a woodblock studio where, I talked about woodcut and wood engraving. They carve wood in even a different way for block printing on fabrics. They're using teak wood, and instead of any of the tools that I showed, they're using chisels that they're hitting with a mallet to carve deep into those blocks. And so I went and spent some time with them to learn, just really to dip my toes in their methods for carving and printing at Ferengini. It was amazing, and I do hope that I get to go back again soon.
Okay, and I'm afraid we don't have time for any more questions, so unfortunately we have to skip one from Michael Simons about typeface and from others. And so we're going to end with a comment from a quote anonymous attendee who says, is Rebecca aware that she's an inspiration to her niece and nephews? And does she know how proud they are of her, as we are today of you? And we thank you, Rebecca. And Liz Spungen. Liz, thanks very, very much for bringing this to us. We all look forward to seeing the work in its original and early opportunity. And just to remind you that there are several more of these Zooms coming up, brought to you by the IFPDA, the International Fine Print Dealers Association, and you can find them on our website. And with that, we're going to sign off. Thank you all for attending. Bye.
Thank you.